Once we are getting closer to the planet we ought to analyze, everything goes wrong. Our spaceship is toast, and the pilot is struggling to crash land and to keep the spacecraft and us in one piece. We are finally down to the surface, and still breathing. But what is awaiting us outside in this alien and possibly hostile world? If that sounds familiar to you, then you likely played Blue Byte's Albion from 1996. Or less likely, you played E.X.P.L.O.R, which was released in 2021 by a one-man studio called Beem Media. And whatever awaits us outside of our spacecraft in the world of E.X.P.L.O.R will be looked into in this review. Albion, on the other hand, is going back onto the shelves for today, though I will need to get back to it a bit later. Alright, so we arrived with our damaged starship Terra Prize on the surface of the planet. Time to have a look around. Fortunately, our board computer already identified a nearby settlement and also found out that the inhabitants use magic which originates from a material called core matter, which is exactly the same stuff we also need to fix up our spaceship. And so the journey of our crew begins right in this settlement. But before we take the first step, we actually need to decide what our crew consists of, though we can still exchange party members later on. Movement and exploration happens from the first-person perspective within a grid-based movement system, which we know from old-school crawlers like Wizardry, Dungeon Master, Eye of the Beholder, and also the old The Bards Tale. Especially to the last one, we got quite a few more parallels here, which already starts with the just mentioned option of being able to retroactively exchange our party members. Not that this would be needed in this game, but we'll get back to the mechanics in just a few minutes. In difference to the Bards Tale, the city in which we are starting out is completely peaceful, and we can freely talk to the inhabitants, who surprisingly also got an idea right away where we could find this core matter. And so we are being sent to the canalization of the city, which will then start exploring and clearing of monsters level after level. And really, there isn't a whole lot more to talk about regarding the story of the game. While we will find a couple of story snippets in the dungeons and a few NPCs, which even give us some quests, these quests don't go much further than go into the next room and pull a lever, or bring me an item from one of the next rooms. While it is nice to have these quests at all, they contribute clearly less to the game than they do in other recent indie crawlers like The Quest and Legends of Emberland, which both really don't have any focus on quests. More of that would definitely have been nice, and that is also true for the story in general as well as the overall atmosphere. Let's think back at Albion, where we left our ship without having any idea about what to expect, and where we were then faced with a completely exotic environment, met strange cat-like creatures and their foreign culture. It felt like we would really be standing in this alien world with our own feet. In E.X.P.L.O.R, it's more like we would stumble over a couple of guys dressed up as knights and ask them for the closest gas station. Especially in that regard, I wished for more. And as Avernum and other games from Spiderweb are showing, you can contribute an incredible amount of world building and atmosphere by proper writing, completely without fancy graphics or a great soundscape, which you will not find in E.X.P.L.O.R either. It's hard to call it anything but cheap or low budget. That's true for the portraits of the characters, the 3D level art, as well as the monster art in the battles. And these graphics also don't fit to each other. It's a similar situation regarding the sound design. While the sound effects aren't really sticking out, the music sounds somewhat cheapish, which is also due to the very audible loop restarts. While I got used to the graphics and sound quickly, and I think it's kinda tolerable, it doesn't really help covering any deficits in immersion and world building. Rather the opposite. And with that, let's go over to the actual content of the game. Having such an interesting setting, same as Albion, I would have loved to explore the world, to travel to another settlement, maybe meet other races and cultures, or anything similar. Unfortunately, E.X.P.L.O.R doesn't do any of that. From the city you go down into the dungeon, which starts out as a canalization, turns into a crypt and then into a lava region. With each of the rather simply structured levels you will spend about 45 minutes, of which the most time is used for battling monsters. And after just about 8 hours you will have finished the game already. The drawing of the dungeon map is taken over by the game itself, and while that's fine with me, I would have wished for a couple of puzzles here and there to have a bit of variety in the gameplay. The only things breaking the monotony in the dungeons of E.X.P.L.O.R are the before mentioned NPCs, which are also giving out quests, and a few signs on the walls with some texts. And so, the gameplay is mostly limited to fighting and upgrading the characters. And in regards to combat, you can compare E.X.P.L.O.R with the Bards Tale again, where you also got two types of enemy encounters. You either run into enemies with static positions on the map, and in E.X.P.L.O.R these are also visible to you, or you get randomly attacked by random encounters, which happens much less frequent than in the Bards Tale though, and with that it's also significantly less annoying. If you should come into the situation where the remaining static enemies are just too hard to beat, you can go into the options menu and toggle more frequent random encounters, so that you can easily grind the 3 to 5 remaining battles for the next level up, which always increases the power of your party by a big margin. Of course, that also means that in E.X.P.L.O.R, same as in the Bards Tale, you can't really say that the game had a certain level of difficulty in the combat, as in both games you can easily make any challenge obsolete by additional grind. I would give it to E.X.P.L.O.R though that you are never forced to do hours of boring grind, as the next level up is always just a few battles away. And with that, let's get down to the combat mechanics. As soon as you run towards an enemy or are attacked by a random one, we get a combat window in which we can see up to 5 enemies in front of us. These, however, are only the ones which can attack us at the time and be attacked. In addition to that, we can also see a number showing how many enemies are queued up to replace their comrades once they meet their maker. In difference to the Bards Tale and Wizardry, however, we are not setting up all the actions of our party members at the same time and then have them executed, but we will handle each character individually when it's his or her turn. At the start of the combat, at least 3 characters have to stand in the front. They will take all the beating and can also hit the enemies with melee. The other characters, which are probably all magic users, will then throw around their spells from the back. While we control a party of 6 characters in E.X.P.L.O.R, there are actually only 4 classes: Warrior, Thief, Cleric and Warlock. And as the Thief is similarly rubbish in combat as in many other games and only dragged with the party due to his ability to pick locks, it's rather natural to have a setup of 2 Warriors and a Thief in the front, and to get 2 Warlocks and a Cleric for the back row. The latter is mostly there for healing and picking up any temporarily deceased group members. While the melee fighters can only use their standard attacks to smash in some heads of individual enemies, clerics and warlocks learn new spells on about every other level up. And among these, there are also some spells later on which will attack all 5 visible enemies at the same time, which basically breaks the balance very similarly to the Bards Tale. While in the beginning of the game it's worth to think about which character is going to attack which enemy, and also the melee fighters are contributing to the fight, this completely changes in the second half of the game, where basically the warlocks just kill everything on the screen at the same time, and the only job remaining to the melees is to be kept alive by the cleric. Because once a front row character dies, this spot is going to be filled by a warlock or cleric from the back row, who will quickly share the same fate. This goes so far that it also won't matter anymore whom the melees are attacking at this point, and you might just block with them instead. And you also won't use any of the cleric's buffs, because they are not really worth the time you need to click and select them. Once you killed enough enemies so that you gathered sufficient XP for a level up, it's time to return back to the city, which can be done at any time using the portal spell, which you'll learn shortly after the start of the game. You can now visit the trainer and pay him some coins so that he will raise the character to the next level, which will automatically increase the character's stats and teach clerics and warlocks new spells. The only ways for the player to influence the character stats is directly at character creation, and of course by equipping items which come with certain stat bonuses. But otherwise it's completely hands off, and your creative freedom is tending towards 0. But at least there's also no randomness in the level ups, like you have in the Bards Tale, where the player can either choose to save scum or to accept the bad results and then try to compensate for the bad level up by grinding even more. Speaking of loading and saving, E.X.P.L.O.R saves automatically each time when you enter and leave the city. While you don't have individual save games which you could freely load, you don't really need them anyways, as it's impossible to get yourself in a situation where you would be stuck or gimped. And with that, we pretty much outlined the whole game already. I would have wished that E.X.P.L.O.R did more according to what the name implies, as in exploring of alien planets, having an adventure. I would be fine with low production values, similar as in the Spiderweb games, if the game offered good world building with great story writing, or if it offered great combat mechanics. But unfortunately, that's not the case here. It's nice that the game does have at least a few texts and NPCs with quests, but overall there's really just a very minimum of storytelling here. And while I would neither classify the dungeons, nor the combat, nor the character development as catastrophe, they are just means to an end. If just one of the main elements of the game was great, you could have looked over the other ones, but as it is, the overall experience can't really convince. Fortunately, E.X.P.L.O.R does at least throw those mechanics overboard, which annoyed me the most in the Bards Tale 1, in the original as well as in the remake. You will neither find endless grind in E.X.P.L.O.R, nor the misery of randomized level ups. And so personally, I would definitely choose E.X.P.L.O.R over the Bards Tale. That said, the HD version of the Bards Tale 1, originally from 1985, only received the lowest score from me, as I always rate depending on the gaming experience a game offers today, independently of the budget being used to create the game. And I can't give more than a thumb halfway down to E.X.P.L.O.R either. Even the average crawler fan, if something like that should actually exist, who would look over the presentation of the game in the Steam trailer, would probably not be convinced by the content the game offers. And I'd rather recommend other indie titles like Legends of Amberland or The Quest. If, even after this review, you think like, I don't mind, I just want to chill and kill some monsters, then you might still get some enjoyment from the game. And considering its price is less than €7 or $8 and accordingly even less in a sale, you can't really do anything wrong in the case you still want to give it a try. And in case this review helped you making a decision or you think you got a decent overview now, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. Please consider checking out my other reviews, previews or even let's plays, and feel free to subscribe to the channel. Also, I invite you to check out the list I compiled of all the games I ever played over at ndnw.net. While the links are mostly leading to German videos, the descriptions are all in English, and if you disable the filters in the top, you can go down memory lane and maybe discover some games you played back in the days. And with that, I will now return to the lovely jungle from Albion and try to not get eaten by these nasty insects. Thank you for watching and I hope to see you again next time.